I'd made sure of that when I slid him the crisp bill folded beneath the divorce letter. All I asked was that he deliver the simple envelope to the table in the corner, the one by the window where my wife sat with her lover. It was a discreet thing. A folded sheet of paper, harmless to anyone but her. Between glasses of wine and quiet, complicit glances, the envelope slid across the table like an afterthought. She didn't see it at first. She was too comfortable, too at ease in that place, as though the table, the man beside her, the view of the river were all just extensions of our home. As if this wasn't a secret rendezvous, but her new reality. My heart pounded from where I stood, half hidden behind a column near the bar. But there was nothing left to say. The letter would speak for me. Amanda's smile faltered the moment her fingers brushed the paper. Curiosity tugged at her brow. She opened it without hesitation, expecting perhaps a sweet note, a forgotten reservation, reminder. Something harmless. Then I saw it. The shift. The way her smile collapsed into a thin, bloodless line. Her eyes skimmed the words, and I saw the tremor in her hand. "What is this?" she murmured, her voice soft but sharp enough to cut through the low hum of conversation. Her lover, him, leaned in, casual at first, then stiffening when he caught sight of the page. His brow furrowed. "What's wrong?" he asked, the fake warmth in his voice flickering into something colder. Amanda didn't answer. She couldn't. Her fingers clutched the letter like it might dissolve in her grip, her mind racing for an explanation, for a way to undo the moment. But there was no escape. I stayed where I was, watching it all unfold. A voyeur in my own tragedy. The letter wasn't just a legal document, it was a final act, a silent execution. The culmination of days spent unraveling the truth. Not just her affair, but the real betrayal. The stolen company shares. The secret negotiations behind my back. The inheritance my father built, piece by piece, now carved into offerings to her lover. It wasn't just my heart she gave away. It was my legacy. The betrayal started small. A crack in the foundation, a distant smile when she left the house, a too casual explanation when she came home late. Little lies, paper thin, easy to believe when you want to believe, but the clues piled up. A text glimpsed over her shoulder. A whispered phone call behind a locked door. And then one night, I followed her. What I found wasn't just infidelity. It was a conspiracy. Piece by piece, she handed him everything I built. Every contract, every inside deal, every strategic decision I worked late nights to protect now slipped to him under the table, with a smile on her face. It was as if betrayal was just another chore on her to-do list. I remembered the night. I confronted her. No screaming, no slamming doors, just a single question. "Why?" "It's not what it seems," she'd said, voice too calm, like rehearsed lines from a play. "You need to understand." "Understand what?" I cut her off. "That you're selling off everything my father left me? That you're doing it for him?" Her mouth opened, then closed again. No excuse was good enough, and we both knew it. It wasn't just the affair. It wasn't just the lies. It was cold, calculated betrayal, financial, personal, absolute. That night. I felt something break inside me. Not just love, not just pride. Something deeper. The quiet belief that we were on the same side. That belief shattered, and no apology could piece it back together. Now, across the room, I watched her panic. Her lover leaned closer, his brow furrowed in confusion and growing fear. "What is this?" he asked again, voice rising just enough to draw the eyes of nearby diners. Amanda didn't answer. Her fingers crumpled the letter's edge, her gaze darting around the room, searching for me. But I stayed in the shadows. I wanted her to feel every second of that cold panic. The realization that the game was over, that I'd been watching all along. Her lover shifted in his chair, the casual arrogance slipping from his posture. This wasn't a romantic evening anymore. This was a reckoning. And in that moment, I realized I'd won. Not because I wanted her to suffer. Not because I wanted revenge. I won because the mask was off. There was no pretending anymore. No lies to hide behind. Just the truth, sharp and bitter, laid bare on the table between them. She stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. Her hands shook, but she forced herself to smile. That polite, fragile smile she wore at parties when we played the happy couple. But now it was crumbling, and so was she. Her lover, still confused, asked one last time, "What the hell is going on?" She had no answer, and all I could do was watch. Watch as the weight of her choices dragged her under. Watch as the life we built disintegrated in her hands. And in that silence, I felt something shift inside me. Not peace, not forgiveness, but something close to relief. Because the game had changed, and she knew it. I gave her the freedom she thought she wanted, but at a price she never saw coming. Richard felt something was off, more than usual. That night he sent Amanda a simple message. "How are you?" Then sat, phone in hand, waiting for a reply that never came. That silence planted a seed of doubt, one that only grew in the days ahead. Little things stood out. Unfamiliar perfume on her clothes, extra makeup for no reason, and smiles that no longer reached her eyes. He told himself he was imagining it, until the call. It was a client asking about a project, just routine. But, in the background, Richard heard a laugh, her laugh, soft, easy, familiar, yet out of place. Amanda was at a client's office, but it wasn't work making her laugh. That was the moment it all clicked. Needing answers, Richard remembered a contemporary art class Amanda once mentioned, a class that never seemed like her. He went. The gallery was nearly empty, but Amanda was there, not alone. A man Richard didn't know sat beside her, their hands brushing, their eyes locked. It was intimate in a way Richard hadn't seen between them in years. He froze. Disbelief and fury tangled in his chest, but he stayed silent. This wasn't the time to explode. It was time to understand. In the days that followed, Richard followed her, quietly gathering every detail. Meetings in quiet cafes, walks in distant parks, all with the same man. Each encounter broke him, a little more. But anger sharpened his focus. Amanda was smart. Any confrontation would push her further away. He needed a plan. That plan came to life one night in a quiet bar where Amanda met her lover once again. Richard, hidden in the corner, watched. When the moment was right, he handed a sealed envelope to the bartender who delivered it to Amanda's table. Amanda opened it, her smile vanishing instantly. Divorce papers. Her lover leaned in, curious. But Amanda folded the paper fast, as if hiding it could undo it all. Richard left without a word. The pain didn't leave with him, but the power shift was undeniable. For once, Amanda wasn't the only one holding secrets. He drove aimlessly that night, the weight of betrayal sitting heavy in his chest. But beneath that betrayal was something deeper, something missing. The full truth. And Richard was done waiting for Amanda to offer it. When he returned home, Amanda was waiting. Her face pale, her hands trembling. "We need to talk," she whispered. Richard didn't argue. "Start talking." Tears filled her eyes. "I know what you saw, and I won't make excuses. But you don't know the whole story." Richard's laugh was cold. "What's left to know?" Her voice cracked. "It wasn't just an affair, Richard. It started with the company." He froze. "The company?" Amanda nodded, unable to meet his eyes. We were broke. The company was failing. I was desperate. He offered to buy some shares at a price no one else would. Richard's stomach twisted. You sold part of my company to him? I thought I was saving us, Amanda choked. I thought I could fix it before you found out. But then, he wanted more. Richard's hands curled into fists. More? He used it against me, she whispered. The affair? It wasn't supposed to happen, but once it did, he wouldn't let me go. If I walked away, he threatened to destroy everything. The pieces finally fit. The secrecy, the fear in her eyes, the way she pulled away. It was never just the affair. It was blackmail, desperation, and betrayal twisted into one unbearable knot. Richard's anger dimmed, leaving only exhaustion. You could have told me. I was scared, Amanda whispered. Scared of losing everything, of losing you. Richard shook his head. You didn't just lose me. You lost our trust. And without that, there's nothing left. Amanda reached for him, but he stepped back. I need time to decide what's next. For the company, for us. Her tears fell freely now. Please, Richard. But he was already walking away, leaving Amanda alone with the wreckage. There were still secrets between them. Richard could feel it. And the truth, whatever was left of it, was something he'd have to uncover on his own. Some betrayals don't scream. They just echo inside. You, long after the storm is over. Richard felt that silence. The kind that made every breath heavier, every step harder. The weight of Amanda's choices had crushed everything they built, and now all that remained were unanswered questions and broken trust. Richard walked aimlessly, his mind tangled in the wreckage Amanda left behind. Selling the shares was just the surface. There was more, something she hadn't told him. And that unknown truth gnawed at him like an open wound. Amanda's confession haunted her just as much. Fear had driven her. Desperation had blinded her, and now she was left with nothing but regrets. She knew Richard deserved the whole truth, even if it destroyed any chance they had left. The next morning, Amanda found him at the corner cafe, his usual Saturday refuge. She stood at the door for a moment, heart racing, but there was no running now. When she sat across from him, Richard's eyes were cold, yet calm. The kind of calm that comes after too much pain. I need to tell you everything, she said, voice trembling. Not to excuse it, but because you deserve to know. Richard listened, his silence sharper than any accusation. Amanda confessed. The threats, the blackmail, the choices she made, thinking she could protect the company. Protect them. But in the end, her fear destroyed the very thing she was trying to save. When she finished, Richard's voice was low, almost tired. You didn't save anything, Amanda. You broke us. Tears welled in her eyes, but she held her ground. I know, and I'm sorry for all of it. For a moment, neither spoke. The weight of their shared history filled the silence between them. Finally, Richard exhaled. The fight in him finally gone. I'm selling the company, he said, voice steady. Not to him, never to him, but to someone who will respect what my family built. Amanda wanted to argue, to beg for another chance. But deep down she knew. There was no saving this. I hope you find peace, Richard said softly. And I hope I do too. There was no anger, no final explosion, just acceptance. And somehow, that hurt even more. Days turned into weeks. Richard found a buyer who valued the company's legacy. Amanda cut ties with the man who shattered her world and sought help to understand the fear that led her down that road. Slowly, she pieced herself back together, through therapy, through art, through facing the mirror without turning away. Months later, their paths crossed at a crowded event. Their eyes met. A brief glance, a silent acknowledgement that they both survived. They had been broken, but not destroyed, and in that quiet nod, they both let go. The past couldn't be erased, but it no longer owned them. Some stories don't end with a reunion or revenge. Sometimes the greatest victory is simply surviving the choices that almost destroyed you and finding a way to live again.